Mr. Terrence Howard had a lot of attention for a video with Joe Rogan recently. In it, he claimed 1 times 1 equals 2. Lines don't exist and their geometry don't represent true mathematics. And true mathematics would be a statement against the church, in particular the shape of its cross. If you are in this channel, you know about the 3 constants 0, 1, plus infinity, the compatibility of these 3 constants with numbers, the line, and the Holy Trinity. So Terrence has a lot of explaining to do. First claim of Mr. Terrence Howard, 1 times 1 equals 2. Or in other words, 1 times 1 equals 1 plus 1. So x times x equals x plus x is an equation that is usually not solved by 1. So if you want to keep the same meaning and goodness of multiplication with the symmetry of commutativity and associativity of multiplication, then the multiplication of Mr. Howard can only keep the same meaning and functionality if what he calls 1 is actually 2, right? So Mr. Howard would just start counting with the number 2, and indeed with the regular multiplication, 2 times 2 equals 2 plus 2. So Terrence can work with this if he starts with the number 2, if he calls what we understand as the number 2, 1. In that case, you have 1 plus 1 equals 1 times 1. The natural numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of Terrence Howard would then become the even numbers. That could be a way to have 1 times 1 equals 2. But Terrence actually explains that 1 times 2 equals 3, and 1 times 3 equals 4, and so on. So it doesn't go with the regular multiplication. He has a multiplication which seems to be the operator m times n equals m times n plus m. It's a hybrid operator that Terrence calls multiplication. And this operator uses both multiplication and addition. Is that wise? Pragmatically, I know no physics or field of study where this particular operator was defined. Right? It's an operator that we can model with our operators, and it has never been set as something that will help you study something, right? So Terrence has to develop a field of mathematics where that operator is relevant. Otherwise, the canonical multiplication that we usually understand is just more powerful and useful to describe mathematics, and will keep its title of multiplication. E equals mc squared, and all the other equations use the regular multiplication. In terms of efficiency, how you define numbers, because this new multiplication is a merging of the canonical multiplication and addition, multiplication loses commutativity and associativity. With Terrence multiplication, 2 times 3 equals 8, but 3 times 2 equals 9. 1 times 1 times 1 equals either 3 or 4, depending on how you set the parentheses. So you don't have commutativity or associativity, right? And that is a problem of definition efficiency, because these two properties are also applied to addition. So in the regular way, addition and multiplication are 2 fundamental operators of numbers. They have 2 constants, 0 and 1. X is a number, x, because it adds itself from 0 and multiplies itself from 1. Right? So both addition and multiplication are commutative and associative, satisfy associativity and commutativity. And these are great properties to preserve for these 2 fundamental operators, where you get a bundle with the 2 of them have the same thing. And number x is x because of the number system emerging from addition and multiplication. And you have the distance from 0 being the adding aspect of x, and the scaling from the unit being the multiplying aspect of x. And x has an identity, the number x, and carries both a specific adding aspect and multiplying aspect that we call space and time. And so by creating this hybrid operator, Terrence destroys the common property of addition and multiplication, and so he hides the time and space aspect of numbers, which seems costly for the concept of numbers, for the simplicity of it. And again, it doesn't tie as well to the regular multiplication that has been used in many fields of study where multiplication has specific properties. So in short, Terrence needs to show that his operator is tied to core operations of nature, and even if his multiplication is very useful for a new field of physics, we might choose to still define it, as its own thing, but keep addition and multiplication because of the deep symmetry and simplicity of these canonical operations on numbers. It's just the right way to decompose the dynamic of numbers because it exhibits some similarity between the two aspects. So we like that Terrence thinks geometrically, but one confusion that Terrence seems to make is that he presents multiplication as the area of the square between two vectors. And so seeing that it's an area, he says, well, it's arbitrary what you call this area. You can call it the unit, you can call it 2. So he says that's 2. But numbers, they are homogeneous. So even if you call this area 2, it has consequences because when you go back to the line, to the unit, you will force the relationship 1 times 1 equal 1 plus 1. And so you will change, either you change the definition of multiplication, right? You hide the multiplicative identity by counting from 2, or you break the symmetry of multiplication with respect to addition by hiding it behind this hybrid operator. So geometrically, 1 times 1 is not represented as the area of a square, but as the identity scaling of the unit. There's no ambiguity where the identity scaling leads. It leads to 1. 1 as identity scaling leads to itself 1. Geometrically, 1 times 1 equals 1 because you don't interpret it as the area of a square and create problem along the way, but you interpret it as the identity scaling. So there's no ambiguity of what it points towards. So that's for the 1 times 1 equal 2. Second claim of Mr. Terrence Howard is that there is no line in nature, and we should put an end to the concept of linear geometry and related mathematical concepts such as the Pythagorean theorem. Right? So Terrence says there's no line in nature. Things are curved and circular. Show me a line, he says. And so he thinks that change multiplication and it has consequences. Let's suppose that there are only circles. I'm a point and I travel around the circle. What is my movement? Well, it would seem that I'm walking on the line from my perspective. The universe is a manifold and is locally Euclidean. That's why people believe the world is flat, right? And so it's a valid way to describe your journey as a line on a circle. So the line remains something of mathematics that apply to circles. It's a valid way to describe your journey on a circle or on a curve. And multiplying complex numbers is the same, which is a very circular thing because you have the basically the angle, the phase, the argument of the complex numbers. Multiplying complex numbers is the same as adding linearly angles, right? That's why complex number is like e to the I pi theta. So even when the world is made of circle or curve, if you just stay on the unit circle, the journey remains described by a linear process, here adding the angles. And so line remains useful to describe the journey on that curve or on the circle. Furthermore, he talks about frequencies and multiple of frequencies. So Terrence talks about hydrogen and the multiple of that, right? And frequently are usually understood with a wave function with a cosine and a sine, which protect the point of the circle on the x and y axis. So you have this relationship, and pi is the relationship from the linear to the circular. The parameter is 2 times pi times the radius. So the circular and waves can be understood with lines. Not only that, but they are indeed understood with lines. Terrence himself talks about the wavelength to talk about frequencies and multiple of frequencies. So even if there's no line in the terminal domain, in the reality, in the physics, if everything is curved, the circle and curves are still described and their difference of frequencies defined relative to linear mathematics. And so in the non-terminal domain that generate those objects, the terminal object, which may be only curves and circles, the non-terminal domain where the true dynamics of objects are, where the difference is defined, where the diffeonic syntax is defined, linear mathematics still describe and parameterize waves and curves. So you still have the line as the thing that describe your world without lines. Right? So you can derive basically circles from line. And you do describe the difference between frequency and wave by the wavelength, by linear aspect, or you talk about angle, which has multiply with addition, linear addition. So the line doesn't disappear just because you have waves. The third claim of Terrence Howard is that true mathematics is a statement against the church. So according to Terrence, lines are unnatural, which makes the cross unnatural. And so he supposes that he faces opposition from the church because he advocates for this curved view of the world. And instead of lines, he says that the universe breathes in and out. So everything is a balance, included, it seems, good and evil. He says, be a messiah and be a rascal also. Maybe it's just a way to communicate, but it seems that it is also in theory. It is derived from this idea that there is no line, there is no dividers. It's a circle it's a circle. Not only it's curved, but it's a sort of a cycle. And as it relates to mathematics, he ignores 0, which is the boundary between good plus and evil minus. It ignores 1 as a multiplicative identity. By starting with 2 or by having this hybrid multiplication, 1 loses the status of the multiplicative identity. So ignore 0, ignores 1. And it doesn't also conceptualize specificity, which can be the source of irrationals such as pi, which links sort of the line and the circle. So these 3 constants, 0, 1 plus infinity, make the language of the church compatible with mathematics via the Trinity. These primary numbers belong in the non-terminal domain and generate the terminal real numbers as usually understood. And these are 3 primary numbers hologically projected inside the numbers x. And they correspond to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is a founding language that allows to describe curves. Even Terrence talks about angles or wavelength. And it is represented on the line canonically. So this trinity would remain descriptively relevant even if there is not a single line in the terminal physical domain. So I don't think there is a model with compatibility with the conception of the church, which has a line and which is also compatible with curves. And obviously, our mathematics describe curves as well. So it's not because you remove a line from one aspect of what exists that it disappears from the ontology of the language of mathematics that generate all the description of the curves. Because the curves need to be described. They don't just exist. They also are conceived and described, and so there's lines involved in that. So church is compatible via the Trinity to the numbers, not incompatible. And the cross itself is sort of the blueprint of how lines are mapped to the unit circle via the complex numbers with the 2 axes. And this is also how frequencies are models, like the frequency of light with the e to the I pi, the frequency. And so finally, I want to comment on a possible negative aspect of Mr. Howard. The negative aspect is the risk of semantic entropy, a phenomenon whereby important meanings are being replaced by less fundamental meanings, creating noise and diverting the focus from useful semantics. So the cognitive theoretic model of the universe, or CTMU, developed by Christopher Langan, talks about a sort of kind of breathing in and breathing out in the form of two meta-simultaneous phases of conspansion, namely the inner expansion and reconciliation, or more generally, the topological and descriptive embedment of reality inside itself. And the CTMU described this phenomenon at the ontic level of reality, where both lines and waves are possible. So it is a prior concept, it's a prior breathing in, breathing out. And to me, it seems that the concept of Mr. Terrence Howard are displacing the concept of breathing in and breathing out at the terminal level, and it hides a more fundamental concept of cycles, namely the cycle of conspansion of the CTMU, where both waves and lines are possible. And lines can be modeled with 0, 1 plus infinity, which are three very important constants, which are all ignored by the mathematics of Mr. Terrence Howard, because 0 is out, 1 loses its status, it sort of become functionally 2, and and there's no conception, object-oriented conception of the number x, with also the plus infinity that brings this the generation and the irrational numbers. So that's it for the reaction to the mathematical claims of Mr. Terrence Howard. We hope that his multiplication and concepts bear fruit. As it stands, with my understanding, I cannot adhere with some claims as it relates to mathematics. And I have concerns about semantic entropy as it relates to metaphysics, because it seems to me that the CTMU is a more fundamental language, more fundamental concept that also has some of the characteristics that Mr. Terrence Howard tries to put out as fundamental, but there would actually be fundamental as a subset level of the terminal reality of how things are shaped, rather than a fundamental level of how reality exists and evolves. Thank you, and make sure to support the channel with a like and subscription. Have a good one.